All right, everyone, there was a Monmouth poll released the other day that shows Joe Biden actually now in a close third place, technically a dead heat statistical tie with Sanders and Warren riding on 20 just ahead of him. I question the veracity of this particular poll. It does not appear to comport with the other polls that have been released in the same period. They respectively had Biden at, I think it was 23 and 31. That is respectively CNN and The Economist. The Economist I tend to weight more than Monmouth or these other polls. The sample size appears to be a bit artificially low as well. It looks like a rushed hatchet job to try to start an organic movement against Biden. I'm not saying that in a conspiratorial sense, but it sounds like they're just like, well, we need a better Democrat. We need this to be a race between Sanders and Warren to see whether the country will be far left or further left, if the Democrats win. Biden definitely has problems. He just got off of, his next level of gaffe tour, basically confusing New Hampshire and Vermont, saying more weird shit. He came out with basically an apology thing saying, well, no, folks, don't worry, I'm not going crazy. And I think it was meant to be slightly tongue-in-cheek, like a joking reference to his own gaffes. Doesn't come off that way, though. Here's the thing, though. If Biden being confused, making mistakes, being possibly a little bit demented, was a problem to voters, don't you think that would have shown since he's been doing that all along? I think that it would have. I don't think that you lose a third of your entire core of support based on the fact that you made a few more gaffes or dementia errors since you've already been doing that for months anyway. I don't think that comports to reality. I think this poll is likely an outlier. Now, we've got to wait and see. It could be that the next 2-3 polls come in and they corroborate Monmouth, and it's actually just a huge organic upswelling of dislike for Biden that wasn't reflected in the polls that closed literally the day before and the day before that. It's possible. I just don't think it's likely. When we look at the aggregate, it's wildly off. It certainly seems to be overestimating Sanders' support by about 5 points. It appears to have some screwy numbers at the underside of the field, like for Booker, I believe, was riding at 4 in this poll. It could have been the polling methodology. It could have been the small sample size. It could have been that they, just by random chance, they accidentally called too many people in an area where Biden happens not to be popular. Random chance does occur. There's a possibility if you have a sample size in a few hundred range. It's possible that just, by virtue of pure chance, you called an extra dozen people that hate Biden. Or arguably, you accidentally called Republican, maybe. That'd be funny. And they said, I hate Joe Biden. I'm a Yang Gang all the way. Should be funny. Tulsi Gabbard supporters, they're the accidentally called Republicans. Who do you support for the Democratic nomination? Dumbo. Who do you support for the Dem nomination? Bozo the Clown. At this point, probably one of the upper tier candidates. Both of them. They're all seeing pink elephants these days, though. Here's the thing. A single poll, when you see the media jump all over a singular poll, which should be just part of an aggregate, and they should be reporting on that. When they do this, there's usually a reason. This shows me more than anything else that the further left media it doesn't think Biden can do it. They think differently from, I guess, the Democratic lay people. And the thing is, Biden's not popular. He's riding in the mid-20s to the low 30s, somewhere in that general region. That's not a popular candidate. It just happens that there's such a crowded field that he can potentially win with 25-30%. He's not popular. He's a very unpopular frontrunner, all things considered. Trump, oddly enough, till towards the end, till after Super Tuesday, certainly, he was a relatively unpopular frontrunner. It wasn't until after Super Tuesday he had basically sealed the deal. I saw the writing on the wall. Most other people, I think, that were analyzing things without bias saw that. Nate Silver certainly didn't. Oh, if Ted Cruz wins these 3 states he ends up losing in, then he can be the nominee still. Oh, all he has to do is partner with Rubio as running mate and then get Kasich to endorse him. And if you combine their numbers and then Jeb Bush comes in and gives them their money, and then Carly Fiorina comes in, then they equal Trump, and so he can win. It's never going to happen. The thing is this. If I look at all the other polls, Biden's way ahead. And that makes sense. It makes sense that he would be ahead of a field that primarily is comprised of also-rans that lack viability. This is a viability election, an electability election, oddly enough. And then a handful of far leftists. By the way, this poll shows Kamala at 8. I'm not sure that she's still that high. I think she should be lower than that right now. I think that her collapse should organically continue. At some point, when her core fans realize she's not viable, they've got to find somewhere to go if they care about electability. Those core fans in such an election, I think, in a lopsided sense, do care about that. Biden's core fans. Now, I would admit, over time, Biden has slid a little since his last peak, but it doesn't make sense that he would suddenly slide by that margin. Like 10 points? No, I just don't believe it. Or nearly 10, like 7 or 8 points. That's quite a slide. I can't think of anything Biden has said or done over the last couple of weeks that would cause that to happen, so I tend to distrust it. But then again, we'll see. We have to wait for more polling. The problem is that polling in this election has been more sporadic than it should be, especially not on the national level, but on the state-to-state level. Like, we've got almost nothing from Iowa. We've got relatively little from, like, Nevada, South Carolina, a little bit more, I think, now from New Hampshire. It almost looks like they were waiting for Bernie Sanders to gain enough steam that they could have him ahead in the polls so they could, I don't know, shove Biden aside. We know that they cooked the polls. They certainly did in 2016. Either that or their methodology is totally off. Why would I trust them too far? But as far as the RCP aggregate, it tends to ride near reality. We have to understand an aggregate's not the real number. It's just the best guess number. That's what you get within this statistical framework. You want more polls aggregated if possible. It'd be wonderful if they did them more regularly and had larger sample sizes. It'd also be nice if they would release little things about their methodology that the average person could understand. Like, I'm not going to sit there and bother analyzing their 30, 40 pages of this is our methodology and when t approaches the probability matrix. No, people aren't going to be interested, number one. They're not going to understand what the fuck I'm saying, number two. I got a B in statistics when I was in college. It was all right. It was better than some forms of, arguably, mathematics. A little bit easier in some ways. Some of the functions that you have to use is like, why am I even... It's basically, it gets to the point where like, why do I exist? Can you imagine actually having to be a statistician? I don't mean like a Nate Silver celeb so-called statistician that primarily writes opinion pieces now. I mean like actually having to crunch numbers all day. Like, it's sort of like the equivalent of being like, I guess, a magician or something like that. And it's like they've got like a, what's it called? Being a wizard, and it's like, what people think I do, and it's like some dude with a sword like casting a dragon out of his hand. It's what I actually do, and it's like a bunch of books and fucking calculations and shit like that. Basically spreadsheet magic, you could call it, I guess. I suppose if you're doing like Hermeticism, that'd be a real problem. Then you run out of paper or papyrus, if you're trying to be more authentic. I'm getting off on a real tangent here. But long story short, though, the single Monmouth poll, wait until you get at least 2 other polls to corroborate. I have a feeling they probably won't. That's about all. Peace out.